This incompetent will finally embarrass herself. After this deal, I'm done with her. Morgan stared at the glowing text message on Carter's phone, her hands trembling around her coffee mug. The device lay abandoned on their kitchen counter, forgotten in his rush to take what he called an urgent client call upstairs. The screen had lit up when she accidentally bumped it while clearing breakfast dishes. The message was sent to someone named Sam, with a heart emoji beside the contact. Samantha, his assistant, the woman who'd been working late with him far too often these past few months. Morgan scrolled up through their conversation, bile rising in her throat. Months of messages. Intimate jokes. Plans for after the divorce. Detailed discussions about pushing her out of Phoenix Strategies once today's Meridian Corporation deal was secured. How he'd been telling investors that she was just background support while he was the real genius behind their consulting firm. Baby, you should see her scrambling around thinking this is her big moment, one message read. She has no clue that today is the day I finally get rid of the dead weight. Samantha had responded with laughing emojis, can't wait to celebrate afterward. Just you and me running the show. 8 years. 8 years Morgan had poured her heart into building Phoenix Strategies with Carter, working 16-hour days from their cramped Seattle apartment, surviving on instant ramen and determination. She was the strategist who crafted every proposal. He was the charmer clients loved. Or so she'd believed. Carter's footsteps echoed on the stairs. Morgan placed his phone exactly where she'd found it and pretended to load the dishwasher, her face a mask of calm. 8 years of marriage to a manipulator had taught her to hide her emotions when survival depended on it. If this story of calculated revenge has you gripping your screen, smash that like button and subscribe to the Formidable Revenge channel. Share this with someone who needs to see what happens when betrayal backfires, and comment below where you're watching from. Let's build a community of justice seekers worldwide. Everything okay down here? Carter asked, wrapping his arms around Morgan from behind. His touch, once comforting, now felt like a snake coiling around her shoulders. Perfect, Morgan replied, leaning into him with an Oscar-worthy smile. Just thinking about our presentation. I'm so excited. He squeezed tighter. Our presentation. That's right, sweetheart. We're going to crush it together. Together. What a beautiful lie. Morgan had spent 6 months preparing for this moment. 6 months researching Meridian Corporation's pain points, their competition, their growth projections. This wasn't just a pitch, it was a surgical strike designed to address every concern they might have. The deal that would make or break their consulting firm. What Carter didn't know was the depth of her sacrifice. While he'd been schmoozing clients at expensive dinners, she'd been the one burning midnight oil, crafting strategies, building the intellectual foundation of their success. Every breakthrough, every innovative solution their clients paid premium prices for, it all came from her mind. She'd built Phoenix Strategies from nothing. Found their first clients through relentless networking. Developed the proprietary methodologies that set them apart from competitors. Carter had been the face, but she'd been the brain, heart, and soul of everything they'd accomplished. Now he planned to steal it all. The cruelest part? They'd been laughing about her dedication. About how she'd stayed up until 3 a.m. perfecting every slide, rehearsing every talking point, completely unaware of the trap being set. She's so pathetic, another message had read. Working herself to death for a company she won't even own by Christmas. Morgan's reflection stared back from the kitchen window, a woman who'd sacrificed her 20s and 30s building someone else's empire, believing they were partners in love and business. The woman in the glass looked tired, older than her 34 years, worn down by endless work and misplaced trust. But beneath the exhaustion, something else flickered in her eyes. Something Carter had never seen because he'd never bothered to look closely enough. Intelligence. Determination. And now, cold fury. He thought he knew her, the supportive wife who'd never question his leadership, never suspect his betrayal. He'd underestimated the woman who'd built his success from scratch. Today's presentation would determine everything. If Phoenix Strategies landed the Meridian contract, it would be worth millions. Enough to secure their future for decades. Carter's future, according to his texts. Without her. The next morning arrived with deceptive normalcy. Morgan woke at 6 as always, went through her usual routine of yoga and meditation, then headed to their home office for final preparations. Carter was already there, looking fresh and confident in his navy suit, the one she'd bought him for their anniversary last year. "Big day," he said, not looking up from his laptop. "Are you feeling ready?" "More than ready," Morgan replied, settling at her desk. The presentation was loaded on both computers, backup copies saved to the cloud. Every slide was perfect, every statistic verified, every argument bulletproof. What Carter didn't know was that Morgan had also spent the early morning hours making additional preparations. A quick call to her divorce attorney, Laura Mitchell, whom she'd worked with on several client cases. A discreet email to their accountant requesting copies of all business financial records. And most importantly, setting up a recording app on her phone. "I'll make us some coffee," Carter announced around 9:30. The meeting was scheduled for 10:30 via video conference. Meridian Corporation's leadership team would be joining from their headquarters in Denver, along with their legal counsel and 3 potential investors. Morgan watched him move around their kitchen with easy confidence. He was handsome, she'd give him that. Dark hair with just enough gray at the temples to look distinguished, green eyes that could charm anyone, a smile that had convinced her to trust him with her heart and her future. But this morning, she saw him differently. The way he hummed while he worked, was he actually happy about what he was planning? He returned with 2 matching black mugs, his and hers coffee cups they'd bought during their honeymoon in Italy. The irony wasn't lost on her. "Here you go, honey," he said, setting her mug down with extra care. "Drink up. You'll need the energy." The coffee looked and smelled normal. Dark roast, just how she liked it. But his smile was too sweet, too deliberate. Morgan took a small sip and watched his face closely. Was that satisfaction flashing across his features? "Thank you," she said warmly. "You always take such good care of me." His phone buzzed. "Samantha, no doubt. I need to use the bathroom quickly before we start," he said, already moving toward the hallway. "Can you pull up the presentation? I want everything ready to go." The moment he disappeared, Morgan sprang into action. With practiced efficiency, she switched their mugs, placing his in front of her computer and hers in front of his. Then she settled back into her chair, pulled up the presentation, and waited. When Carter returned, he sat down without glancing at the mug, took a generous sip of what he thought was his untainted coffee, and smiled at her with perfect, oblivious satisfaction. The meeting was about to begin. And so was his downfall. At exactly 10:30, their computer screen filled with faces. Harrison Mitchell, Meridian Corporation's CEO, appeared in the main window, a distinguished man in his 60s with sharp eyes that missed nothing. Beside him sat Jennifer Walsh, their chief operating officer, and Thomas Rivera, their head of business development. 3 additional windows showed the potential investors Carter had been courting for months. "Good morning, everyone," Harrison said, his voice clear through their speakers. "We're excited to hear what Phoenix Strategies has prepared for us today." Carter straightened in his chair, his confident smile firmly in place. "Thank you for this opportunity, Harrison. Morgan and I have been working tirelessly to create something we believe will transform your operational efficiency." Morgan noticed he emphasized "Morgan and I," making sure to position himself as the leader. But as he reached for his coffee mug to take another sip, she caught something else, a slight tremor in his hand. "Interesting." "Before we begin," Morgan interjected smoothly, "I want to acknowledge what an honor this is. Meridian Corporation's reputation for innovation precedes you, and we're thrilled to potentially partner with an organization that shares our commitment to excellence." The investors nodded approvingly. This was exactly the kind of respect and professionalism they expected. Carter shot her a quick glance. Was that irritation, or was the substance he'd intended for her already beginning to affect him? "Shall we dive in?" Carter asked, clicking to the first slide. Our analysis indicates. He paused, blinking hard. Our analysis indicates that Meridian Corporation faces three primary challenges in the current market landscape. His voice was still strong, but Morgan noticed he was speaking more slowly than usual. Harrison leaned forward slightly, his attention fully focused. These were sharp business people who would notice any sign of weakness or unprofessionalism. The first challenge, Carter continued, is operational redundancy across your regional offices. Our research shows. Another pause. He rubbed his temple with his free hand while reaching for his coffee with the other. Shows that you could achieve 18% greater efficiency through streamlined processes. Morgan watched the investors' faces. They were listening intently, but she could see subtle signs of concern beginning to form. Carter was stumbling slightly over words that should have been second nature to him. The second challenge involves data integration, Morgan said, seamlessly taking over. Your current systems operate in silos, which creates delays in decision-making and reduces your competitive advantage. As she spoke, Carter took another long drink from his mug. The irony was exquisite, he was essentially poisoning himself with his own treachery. But Morgan kept her expression neutral, professional. This had to look natural. Carter, would you like to elaborate on the technical aspects? She asked sweetly. He blinked several times, clearly trying to focus. Yes, absolutely. The technical aspects are quite complex, but essentially. His words were beginning to slur almost imperceptibly. Harrison's eyebrows rose slightly. In the business world, this kind of unprofessional behavior during a critical presentation was career suicide. And Carter was about to make it much, much worse. Carter. Jennifer Walsh's voice cut through the silence as Morgan's husband stared blankly at the screen, his mouth slightly open. 20 minutes had passed since the meeting began, and what had started as subtle confusion was now becoming impossible to ignore. I'm sorry, Carter said, shaking his head vigorously. There's something. He reached for his coffee again, taking another gulp as if it might clear his head. The substance, whatever it was working exactly as he'd planned it to work on her. The data integration challenges are significant. Harrison Mitchell's expression shifted from polite attention to genuine concern. Mr. Williams, are you feeling all right? Perhaps we should reschedule if you're not well. Morgan saw her opening. Harrison, if I may, she said, her voice calm and professional. Carter has been pushing himself extremely hard to prepare for this presentation. He was up until 4 a.m. last night making final adjustments. Perhaps I should take over while he collects himself? It was a masterful move. She appeared caring and professional while subtly suggesting that Carter's behavior was due to exhaustion rather than incompetence. But more importantly, she was positioning herself to salvage what he was destroying. That would be appreciated, Thomas Rivera said from his window. We're very interested in hearing the full proposal. Carter tried to protest. No, I'm fine. I can. But as he attempted to stand, he swayed slightly and had to grip the edge of the desk. The investors exchanged glances that spoke volumes. Please, darling, Morgan said, standing and gently placing her hand on his shoulder. Let me handle this. You've done so much work already. To the camera, she added, I know every detail of this proposal as well as Carter does. We've been true partners in developing this strategy. What she didn't mention was that she had developed 90% of it herself. Carter had been the presentation face, but she'd been the brains behind every analysis, every recommendation, every innovative solution they were proposing. Morgan smoothly transitioned to the next slide. As I was saying, your data integration challenges create a ripple effect throughout your entire operation. Our analysis of your Q3 reports shows that information delays cost you approximately $2.3 million in missed opportunities. Now she was in her element. This was what she'd been born to do, take complex business problems and create elegant, profitable solutions. As she spoke, she watched the investors' faces transform from concern to interest to genuine excitement. Furthermore, she continued, clicking to a detailed chart she'd spent weeks perfecting, our proposed implementation timeline would have you seeing measurable results within 90 days, with full optimization achieved in 6 months. Harrison leaned back in his chair, clearly impressed. These metrics are quite ambitious, Mrs. Williams. How confident are you in these projections? Completely confident, Morgan replied without hesitation. We've modeled these scenarios using data from 3 comparable companies, and in each case, our methods exceeded projected outcomes. Behind her, Carter was trying desperately to regain his composure. He'd managed to sit back down, but his face was pale, and he was blinking repeatedly as if trying to clear his vision. The substance he'd intended to humiliate her with was systematically destroying his credibility instead. This is impressive work, Jennifer Walsh said. The depth of analysis is exactly what we'd hoped to see. Thank you, Morgan said, genuinely pleased. This project represents months of research and strategic thinking. We understand that you have multiple consulting firms competing for this contract, which is why we've gone far beyond surface-level recommendations. In her peripheral vision, she could see Carter fumbling with his coffee mug again, clearly confused about why he was feeling worse instead of better. The beautiful irony wasn't lost on her. He'd planned to watch her humiliate herself, to use her supposed failure as justification for pushing her out of their business. Instead, he was witnessing her finest professional moment while experiencing the very fate he'd intended for her. But this was only the beginning. The best part was yet to come. If we could move to the implementation timeline, Morgan said, advancing to slide 12, you'll see that we've broken the project into 3 distinct phases, each with measurable milestones and success metrics. Harrison Mitchell nodded approvingly, but his attention kept drifting to Carter, who was now gripping the arms of his chair as if the room were spinning. Mr. Williams, are you certain you don't need medical attention? This was the moment Morgan had been waiting for. You know what, she said, as if the idea had just occurred to her. Carter, why don't you step away for a few minutes? Get some fresh air, maybe splash some water on your face. I can handle the rest of the presentation. Carter looked at her with confusion and, was that fear? He was beginning to realize that something was seriously wrong, but he couldn't figure out what. Yes. Maybe that's a good idea, he mumbled, struggling to stand. As he left the room, swaying slightly, Morgan turned back to the camera with a concerned but professional expression. I apologize for the interruption. My husband has been under tremendous pressure lately. He's incredibly dedicated to this project. Of course, Jennifer Walsh said kindly. Please continue. This presentation is fascinating. But as Morgan moved through the remaining slides, she began to notice subtle shifts in the investors' responses. Margaret Torres from Pinnacle Partners was taking fewer notes. Thomas Rivera kept glancing at his watch. The energy in the virtual room was changing. Harrison Mitchell interrupted her mid-sentence about competitive analysis. Mrs. Williams, this is excellent work, but I have to ask, given what we've witnessed today, how confident are we in Phoenix Strategy's ability to maintain consistent leadership throughout a 6-month implementation? The question hit like a punch to the stomach. Morgan realized with growing horror that Carter's breakdown wasn't just embarrassing him, it was reflecting on the entire company's reliability. I understand your concern, she said carefully, but I want to assure you that. The thing is, Jennifer Walsh interrupted, we need to know that our consulting partner can handle pressure. What we've seen today raises questions about your firm's stability under stress. Morgan felt the presentation slipping away from her. All her months of preparation, all her strategic brilliance, was being overshadowed by Carter's sabotage, even as it backfired on him. Perhaps, Harrison said diplomatically, we should table this discussion until everyone is feeling well and we can reconvene with your full team present and functional. No, please, Morgan said, hearing the desperation creep into her voice despite her best efforts. This was an isolated incident. Our track record speaks for itself, and I personally guarantee. But she could see it in their faces. The presentation was over. Not because her work wasn't exceptional, it was. but because Carter's behavior had planted seeds of doubt about Phoenix Strategies' professionalism and reliability. "We'll be in touch," Harrison said with finality. "Thank you for your time today." As the screens went dark, Morgan sat alone in the office, staring at her perfect presentation that had just failed for all the wrong reasons. Carter had managed to sabotage both of them, even while sabotaging himself. The recording on her phone captured his deteriorating condition, yes, but it also captured what looked like a company in chaos. Evidence of his treachery that might not matter if there was no company left to fight over. For the first time since discovering his betrayal, Morgan felt truly defeated. She'd outsmarted him tactically but lost strategically. The revenge she'd orchestrated had destroyed them both. Morgan sat in the silence of their home office, her mind racing through what had just happened. The perfect presentation lay useless on her screen, months of brilliant work potentially wasted because of Carter's unprofessional behavior. But then her phone buzzed with an incoming email, and everything changed. "Mrs. Williams, this is Harrison Mitchell. I wanted to reach out personally after today's meeting. While the circumstances were unusual, I was incredibly impressed by your strategic thinking and professional handling of a difficult situation. Your analysis and proposed solutions are exactly what Meridian Corporation needs. Could we schedule a private call tomorrow to discuss terms? I'd like to explore working directly with you on this project." Morgan read the email 3 times before it fully sank in. Harrison wasn't writing off Phoenix Strategies, he was writing off Carter. Her phone rang immediately. Harrison Mitchell himself. "Mrs. Williams? I hope you don't mind me calling directly. I wanted to have a candid conversation about what happened today." "Of course," Morgan said, her heart pounding. "I've been in business for 30 years, and I can recognize exceptional talent when I see it. Your presentation was outstanding, thorough, innovative, and precisely what we need. Your husband's condition was concerning, but your professionalism under pressure told me everything I need to know about who the real driving force is behind Phoenix Strategies." Morgan felt a surge of vindication she'd never experienced before. "I'm prepared to offer you a consulting contract worth $4.2 million over 18 months, Harrison continued. "But I need to know, are you able to execute this project independently? Because frankly, based on what I saw today, I have concerns about your husband's ability to contribute meaningfully to this level of work." The question hung in the air. This was her moment, the chance to step out of Carter's shadow completely. "Mr. Mitchell," Morgan said, her voice steady and confident, "every strategic element of today's presentation came from my research and analysis. Every innovative solution, every competitive insight, every implementation timeline, that's my work. I built Phoenix Strategies from the ground up, and I'm fully capable of delivering everything I promised you." "That's exactly what I hoped to hear. Let's schedule a face-to-face meeting for tomorrow. Just you and me, we can finalize the contract details." After Harrison hung up, Morgan realized that Carter's sabotage had backfired in the most perfect way imaginable. His unprofessional behavior had eliminated him from the equation entirely, leaving her to claim credit for work that was rightfully hers. She opened her laptop and began drafting emails. First, to Laura Mitchell, her attorney, attaching the recordings from today's meeting and the screenshots of Carter's text messages. Then to their accountant, requesting an emergency separation of business assets. Finally, she composed a message to Samantha, Carter's assistant and co-conspirator. "Samantha, this is Morgan Williams. I'm aware of your inappropriate relationship with my husband and your plans to steal my business. Effective immediately, you're terminated. Your final paycheck will be mailed to you. Any attempt to contact Carter or interfere with Phoenix Strategies operations will result in legal action. Your professional references will reflect the circumstances of your dismissal." As she typed, Morgan heard Carter stumbling down the stairs, likely wondering what had happened to him and how the presentation had gone. She saved all her work, closed her laptop, and prepared to deliver the performance of her lifetime. Carter thought he'd been playing chess while she played checkers. He was about to discover that she'd been playing four-dimensional chess while he was still learning how to move the pieces. Carter appeared in the doorway of their office, looking haggard and confused. His hair was disheveled, his face pale, and his hands trembled slightly as he gripped the doorframe for support. "How did it go?" he asked, his voice hoarse. "I feel like I missed most of the meeting." "Did we get the contract?" Morgan looked up at him with perfect composure, her expression unreadable. "Sit down, Carter. We need to talk." He shuffled to his chair, moving like a man twice his age. "I don't understand what happened to me. I felt fine this morning, then during the meeting, I could barely think straight. Maybe I'm getting sick?" "Oh, you're not sick," Morgan said calmly. "You're experiencing the effects of the mild sedative you put in my coffee this morning. The one you intended to use to sabotage my presentation so you could push me out of the business I built." Carter's face went white, then red, then white again. "What are you talking about? I would never." "Really?" Morgan held up his phone, which she'd retrieved while he was upstairs. "Should I read some of your text messages with Samantha out loud? The ones where you discuss getting rid of the dead weight? Or maybe the ones where you laugh about how hard I've been working on a presentation for a business you plan to steal from me?" She watched him realize that his phone wasn't where he'd left it, watched him understand that his carefully laid plans had crumbled. "Morgan, I can explain." "No need. You see, when you went upstairs to take your urgent client call, I read everything. Every message, every plan, every cruel joke at my expense. So I did what any intelligent person would do when someone tries to poison them." She smiled, and Carter visibly shuddered. "I switched our coffee mugs. You spent the entire presentation drugging yourself with your own sabotage while I delivered the performance of my career." "But the presentation," he stammered. "Did we lose the contract because of what happened to me?" Morgan's smile widened. "Oh, Carter. We didn't lose anything. I secured a $4.2 million contract. But there's no we anymore. Harrison Mitchell called me personally after the meeting. He was so impressed by my professionalism and strategic thinking that he wants to work exclusively with me." She stood up and began pacing, her voice growing stronger with each word. "You see, while you were upstairs sleeping off the drugs you intended for me, I was restructuring our entire business relationship. I've separated all assets, retained Laura Mitchell as my divorce attorney, and terminated Samantha for cause. Oh, and I've forwarded your text messages to her professional licensing board. Her consulting career is effectively over." Carter tried to stand but swayed and sat back down hard. "You can't do this. Half of Phoenix Strategies is mine. I helped build this company." Morgan laughed, a sound like breaking glass. "Did you? Really? Name one client relationship you developed without my research. Name one strategic solution you created without my analysis. Name one presentation you've given that wasn't based on work I'd done." The silence stretched between them as Carter realized he couldn't answer. "That's what I thought. You were the face, Carter, but I was the brain, the heart, and the soul of everything we accomplished. You were just good at taking credit for my work." She walked to their filing cabinet and pulled out a thick folder. "I've documented every client I brought in, every strategy one developed, every late night I spent building what you thought you could steal. My attorney assures me that intellectual property law is very clear about who owns the work they create." "This isn't over," Carter said weakly. "Oh, but it is. The divorce papers will be served tomorrow morning. You'll get exactly what you contributed to our partnership, nothing. The business, the clients, the reputation, the Meridian contract, all mine. Legally and rightfully." Morgan gathered her laptop and files, preparing to leave. "I'm staying at the Fairmont tonight. By the time I return tomorrow evening, I expect you and your belongings to be gone. Try to contact me or interfere with my business, and I'll release a recording of today's meeting that shows you drugging yourself while trying to sabotage me. Your reputation in this industry will be finished." As she reached the door, she turned back one final time. "You taught me a valuable lesson today, Carter. Never trust someone who would poison your coffee. But more importantly, always make sure you know which cup is which. 6 months later, Morgan stood in her new corner office overlooking downtown Seattle, reviewing the latest quarterly reports from the Meridian Corporation project. The results exceeded even her optimistic projections. They'd achieved a 24% efficiency increase and saved the company $4.6 million in the first phase alone. The divorce had been swift and decisive. Laura Mitchell had presented such compelling evidence of Carter's attempted sabotage and planned theft that his attorney had advised him to settle quickly. Morgan retained full ownership of Phoenix Strategies, along with their client list and all intellectual property she could prove she'd developed, which was nearly everything. Carter had tried to contest the settlement, claiming he'd been drugged without his knowledge. But when the toxicology report revealed traces of the mild sedative he'd purchased online 3 days before the meeting, combined with his text messages plotting to remove Morgan from the business, his credibility had crumbled entirely. Samantha had been terminated and reported to her professional licensing board. Her reputation in Seattle's consulting industry was finished. The last Morgan had heard, she'd moved to Portland, trying to rebuild her career far from the wreckage of her poor choices. Phoenix Strategies had expanded by 60% under Morgan's sole leadership. She'd hired 5 brilliant analysts and secured 4 additional major contracts based solely on the success of the Meridian project. The company that Carter had planned to steal from her was now thriving beyond either of their original dreams. And it was hers alone. Her assistant knocked on the door. "Morgan? There's a Carter Williams on line 3. Says it's urgent?" Morgan glanced at her calendar, packed with meetings with Fortune 500 executives who sought her strategic expertise. Carter's name felt like a relic from another lifetime. "Take a message," she said without looking up from her reports. "If it's truly urgent, he can communicate through his attorney." Through her window, she could see the Space Needle gleaming in the afternoon sun, a symbol of the city where she'd rebuilt her life from the ashes of betrayal. Seattle had embraced her vision, her leadership, her authentic voice that was no longer filtered through a husband's ego. Sometimes, late in the evening when she reviewed her achievements, Morgan thought about that morning 6 months ago. How Carter had handed her that poisoned coffee with such smug satisfaction, so certain he was about to watch her destroy herself. How he'd never imagined that his own arrogance would be his downfall. The beauty of perfect revenge, she'd learned, wasn't in elaborate schemes or dramatic confrontations. It was in simply allowing someone's own malice to consume them while you stepped aside and claimed the life they tried to steal. Carter had taught her one final, invaluable lesson: never trust someone who would poison your coffee. But more importantly, always ensure you know which cup is yours. Her intercom buzzed. "Morgan? Harrison Mitchell is here for your 4 o'clock. She smiled, straightening her jacket and preparing to discuss the expansion of their partnership into international markets. The woman who'd once worked 16-hour days building someone else's empire now commanded her own, stronger and more successful than she'd ever imagined possible. In the end, justice had been served in the most fitting way imaginable. Carter had drunk deeply from the cup of his own treachery, and Morgan had inherited everything he thought was his. As she walked toward the conference room where her future awaited, Morgan couldn't help but feel grateful for that terrible morning when her world had shattered. Sometimes the worst betrayal becomes the catalyst for your greatest triumph. The tables hadn't just turned in her favor. She'd built an entirely new table, one where she sat at the head, commanding the respect and success she'd always deserved. Carter had tried to poison her future. Instead, he'd liberated her from the constraints of his mediocrity. And for that, she would always be grateful.